being on the ground in communities to really support what's going on there, to do the training, the guidance. A lot of that can be travel. A lot of that's just about other resources that could be available for those communities who are often, cash strapped and could use support, which CELDF has done in the past. We've used some of our funding to help people on the ground. And then tied to that, as we work on the evolution of community resistance and resilience, a lot of it is about finding kinship and other partners who have other kinds of expertise. And sometimes those people don't have resources either. And so to be able to bring them in to support the communities means we as a connector and as a convener, if we have those resources, if we have that funding on hand, it becomes much more plausible to do the really ground level frontline support work, because that work is so critical in demonstrating to others what is possible and really building the energy and building the confidence. And if we can't be there because we don't have the funding, I think we're missing a lot of opportunities to really try to contend with the existing dominant system, collapse it, and then transform into something else. What we bring and what CELDF has been bringing really for the last 30 years is still very unique and simultaneous, very necessary. The more that exposure can happen and the more that work can happen, I really believe that is going to be part of the driving agent to actually effectively contend with the world we live in and the desire to want to change that. And that is meant not to make sure that somehow CELDF lives on in perpetuity, but the things that we hold, the information we hold, the expertise through us and our partners gets out to others and gets absorbed, right? So that you grow in numbers. So eventually an organization like CELDF at some point may not be necessary or shouldn't be necessary, right? Because people have those skill sets, they have the capability, they have the analysis, but we're still at a point where we have a job to do basically. And the funding is critical to have us do that job.
Welcome to Truth and Reckoning, a broadcast from CELDF. In this show, we'll learn from frontline organizers and communities fighting against environmental destruction. We'll explore different perspectives and innovative strategies for movement building, the potency and the potential of rights of nature, and effective action in defense of our communities. And we'll share inspiring stories of people working towards right relationship with the land and each other. I am your host, Max Wilbert. I'm here with Kai Huschke, CELDF's Executive Director. Kai, good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, good to see you, Max.
So tell us a little bit about CELDF, what the organization is, and why it's needed for folks who might not know that much about who we are and what we do.
Yeah, we kind of serve as really an amalgamation of community resource needs. In our name, of course, is legal. So we've been there providing legal guidance, sort of strategic legal advice, at times over the years, direct representation of either community groups or even local governments as they deal with really the incursion of the corporate state and how to fight back. A lot of education work on sort of how the system functions, where it comes from, why we always feel like we're at a disadvantage when we try to advocate for ourselves. Sounds strange. You'd think that people would understand their systems of government and sort of the pathways they have, but it's really only when these moments of crisis happen and conflict that people really start to get exposed to more of how it truly functions. So getting people more grounded, telling the truth, busting the myths that exist in our society, through our education system, through culture, through the economic system, and really blowing that open so that people could truly see what's really going on. One as a means to sort of reckon with that, because it's often very painful for people. Some of our courses that people go through, they say it takes them years sometimes to just kind of accept that reality before they can really start basically digging in to want to change it. So that education work through trainings, through workshops, through webinars, through our writings, through our book publications that we put out, We try to offer a range of different ways that people can get at this information. Our Substack page, Truth and Reckoning, I see that as an educational tool as well through the podcasts and the things that we post there. So really doing everything we can to be there in support of communities and those willing to take action. And the last area, which is the most important, is once you know what are we going to do about it sort of arena, which is the grassroots activism, the frontline community action work, coming in there as an organization to provide guidance, consultation, resources, and literally at times being there side by side with these community members as they contend with the threats, the realities in their communities, and they want to change that for the better. So that really that partnering at the community level work is really where we want to be, because we believe that is how we're going to transform the system we have today into something that is more akin to how the rest of the world functions outside of human communities. So yeah, those kind of three areas of legal, education, and training, and that frontline community action support is how we function as an organization.
So 2025 is the 30th anniversary of the organization. I know CELDF began as sort of a traditional environmental law firm doing NEPA appeals and other types of permit appeals within the regulatory system, and then moved to focusing pretty exclusively on rights of nature and community rights, working with communities to draft these sort of transformative, revolutionary grassroots people power laws at the community level to revoke corporate rights, revoke the recognition of corporate rights, and challenge corporate power. I came on board the organization about a year ago, and I know the organization is sort of shifting its focus, expanding its focus beyond that community rights and rights of nature work while continuing to do it. So can you talk a little bit about that? What's happened this year? How's the organization changing, and what's on the horizon for CELDF?
Yeah, no, I think you laid it out exactly correctly, and I think that's been really one of the major strengths of the organization and the configuration of people involved, is that as the work has happened on the ground in communities, looking to do the right thing, when you're continuing being obstructed, when you're actually being kind of contained, yet that something has to change, well, then you've got to be willing to adapt and evolve and shift. And that, I think, is what the organization has done over the years, from moving from that traditional environmental law realm that you spoke of, into sort of the assertion of our right to self-govern and self-determine, and using the lawmaking vehicle as a way to do that. And in the process, really coming into a whole new realm, at least from the Western legal perspective, which is to actually see the natural world as really as living, which sounds insane, but from a legal perspective, it is radically different than seeing nature as just a thing or property. And so the rights of nature emergence credit the communities who were really the first to sort of push on that. And by doing so now globally, there are countries and other places really latching on the need to convert their legal system to see nature as rights-bearing. But unfortunately, in this country, the way that the legal apparatus is constructed, it's very constrictive, very restrictive of what communities are allowed to do. And there's more of what they're allowed not to do than what they are allowed to do. And so you can get captured. And I think that was the realization and the work of the lawmaking. To a point, it was effective, but it started to get captured. It started to actually snuff out sort of the movement orientation that work was supposed to invoke. And therefore, now we're into what I would say a new arena of expanding the ability to resist and become resilient, which is where you've come in, Max, and others, to really feed into the expansion of that, saying, well, we need other means. And largely those means, I think, are about getting outside of convention, and then sometimes literally getting outside the legal box in order to really confront the harsh realities of what's going on in this country and, of course, globally, as the power brokers, those who, push the buttons and pull the levers, continue to do so in a very destructive, oppressive, violent way. And we keep thinking, meaning the collective we, that there's answers within that decision-making structure. There's answers within the legal system, or somehow there's answers or solution within the political realities. And I think what we have seen, the communities we work with, we've seen is that, no, there really isn't. So therefore, we have to create something new, we have to find new ways to confront that power. And so expanding in this idea of, where's our food going to come from? And we got to dive more of our energy into that. How do we actually self-govern in a true way? And then probably most importantly, how do we resist the further incursion and destabilization of our communities, whether it's, the human interactive side or the other naturalistic systems that we rely on? Well, we've got to become better resistors and employ means of ways to disrupt and agitate that are going to be effective in actually slowing down or ideally stopping that, but actually then using that energy to build the needs for resilience that unfortunately the system has, almost sucked out of us or stolen from us, right? We've forgotten how to be resilient in a way that's in harmony with the natural world, with the earth. And so we have to sort of learn that or relearn that or invoke that inside us. And I think that's the exciting and promising part of the work that CELDF's involved in with these communities now, is to expand more of that possibility and that capability.
I've been struck studying history over the years, how common it is to have revolutionary movements, liberation struggles, social movements, civil rights movements be led by lawyers and people with a deep education on the current unjust legal structure of a given system or society. And so I've always admired the work of CELDF since long before I started working with you. Because of that very reason, you all lay out very precisely what is wrong, what's corrupt in the current legal structure, and how that isn't something that was built on or added on in recent years or decades. It actually goes to the roots of the law in this country. It's in the Constitution, which prioritizes the rights of private property and wealthy people over working class people, and certainly over the natural world. And those laws have only gotten worse over time rather than heading in the right direction. So when you talk about bursting that bubble that people have and how challenging it is for many people to learn that actually we don't live in a functioning democratic society in which people have the right to make decisions over their own lives and their own communities, that is something that we're taught in society, in school, but it's not the actual reality when you look at the mechanics of how power is distributed and decisions are made in this society. It's very powerful, and it's very important that people be exposed to that critical analysis.
Yeah, you and I were talking earlier about just sort of empire, understanding that the U.S. is an empire. It was built and constructed to be an empire. And if you were to look at it, you should maybe applaud them at how good they have been at trying to tell us that we're not, the propaganda around that. They've really, interestingly, they've pushed on the very things that we want that we actually don't have, but make us believe that we have it. So, they've done an incredibly job of sort of mentally capturing us and then culturally capturing us, that even when we feel it, we're still doubting, that is the reality. And I think that's the unfortunate, sinister brilliance of the system, but it's the very thing that has to break, because that behavior is literally breaking us. And when I say us, the entire planet, not just.
Right. And that's the focus of our work. So tell me, Kai, how can folks support CELDF, get involved, or contribute to what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that thrills me more than anything, is that our power really is driven by those who see the value in what we're doing, and the ways that I laid out earlier between the education work and the legal work and the grassroots organizing support work. And, that has come by people actually getting involved and doing that kind of work in their own community, which I think is most key. But the other realm is just financially being able to support the organization so that we can continue to do this kind of work and be, movement leaders, or at least part of the contingency that has effective capability to be catalyzers for a movement, for a revolution. And for people to give to support that is incredible and so valued and so appreciated in how we can continue to evolve in the way that we have. But in the way that we're formulated, we need steady funding, we need regular funding. And so being able to donate what you can, whether it's a one-time donation, whether it's on a monthly basis, whether it's about, if you're someone who's maybe of an older generation and thinking about when your time is up on this planet, your estate planning things, all the various things of which people have a means of funneling those funds towards an organization like CELDF, that's what we need to keep doing the work and ideally building the momentum, building the power, and that breakthrough that's necessary. And that's really going to come from individuals. Institutions are much more difficult. Institutions of various kinds are really part of the overall apparatus that we're contending against. So the more individuals who can give to CELDF, the more capability we have to make the effective decisions that we have, I think, been making over the last 30 years. And so, yeah, I mean, writing those checks, getting online, talking to us about other means of financially supporting the organization, that is, mission critical for us. And you talk about sort of historically how things have worked, I think back to the era of abolition and the work that was happening on the ground by various people, including someone like William Lloyd Garrison, who spoke out a lot about the realities of needing to abolish slavery. And a lot of his work was supported by very wealthy individuals who understood that they weren't the ones capable of doing it, but they needed to support those that could. And so they used their money, their wealth that they'd accumulated to support that kind of stuff. And I feel like we're in the same spot. We're trying to be abolitionists of the corporate state, and therefore we need those who have resources to support our work, and not just ours, but all those communities that we work with and the partners we work with.
Thank you, Kai. Can you just give us a few quick examples of the work that this funding is actually supporting?
Yeah, let me pick one from each of the different categories. So let's say in the legal category, a lot of our work has also been about developing effective policy, largely in the realm of rights of nature that you mentioned. And so the work that's gone into, for instance, the New York law, the New York Waters and Great Lakes bill there, which is really a rights of nature piece of legislation, not only in the drafting of that, but the various coalition building efforts, the educational efforts that have gone into really moving now rights of nature, at least within our system of government, up to a different level of visibility, to really show people that it's possible, it's plausible. You just have to put the energy into it and actually, become a strong advocate for it. And so that's where funding can be helpful in actually not only bolstering what's happening in New York State, but actually looking at other states to join. This is, again, how movements build, even legislatively. We've seen they show up in one place and they show up in another. And so you need something underneath that. And so that's one arena. In the education arena, looking at the further development of necessary and timely webinars, for instance, and pulling in guests to be able to do that, as well as adapting our flagship educational program, Democracy School, to actually fit the realities of what's going on the ground and to do effective work and actually developing really an educational series. So think about, multiple episodes, being able to come in to learn about different facets of how corporations got their legal power, learn about how movements build, or learn about the realities of what communities are facing and the various myths that we have to contend with. Well, that takes resources to put this together, to produce it, to do it in a quality way, to distribute it. That's another arena where funding can be effective. And then lastly, and really most importantly, being on the ground in communities to really support what's going on there, to do the training, the guidance. A lot of that can be travel. A lot of that's just about other resources that could be available for those communities who are often, cash strapped and could use support, which CELDF has done in the past. We've used some of our funding to help people on the ground. And then tied to that, as we work on the evolution of community resistance and resilience, a lot of it is about finding kinship and other partners who have other kinds of expertise. And sometimes those people don't have resources either. And so to be able to bring them in to support the communities means we as a connector and as a convener, if we have those resources, if we have that funding on hand, it becomes much more plausible to do the really ground level frontline support work, because that work is so critical in demonstrating to others what is possible and really building the energy and building the confidence. And if we can't be there because we don't have the funding, I think we're missing a lot of opportunities to really try to contend with the existing dominant system, collapse it, and then transform into something else. That still requires things like money and funding to be able to do. So yeah, that's where the money would go if they were to donate to CELDF.
I'm thinking as well of supporting the Watershed Bill of Rights here in Lane County, Oregon, where I live, our ongoing legal support for Grant Township, Pennsylvania, fighting the fracking industry. You mentioned the Great Lakes and New York Waters Bill of Rights in New York State, and all of CELDF's educational work, speaking at conferences, working with the rights of nature movement around the world, the rights of wetlands, collaborating with a broad range of folks across the movement, building our partner advisor committee, and then supporting frontline communities from down in Arizona, folks who are fighting the border wall and working to protect ecology there, to communities in Washington State fighting logging and beyond. We're doing all the work that we can to try to push this movement forward, to build transformative change, and folk support is really important to make that happen.
What we bring and what CELDF has been bringing really for the last 30 years is still very unique and simultaneous, very necessary. And so the more we can be, the more that exposure can happen and the more that work can happen, I really believe that is going to be part of the driving agent to actually effectively contend with the world we live in and the desire to want to change that. And that is meant not to make sure that somehow CELDF lives on in perpetuity, but the things that we hold, the information we hold, the expertise through us and our partners gets out to others and gets absorbed, right? So that you grow in numbers. So eventually an organization like CELDF at some point may not be necessary or shouldn't be necessary, right? Because people have those skill sets, they have the capability, they have the analysis, but we're still at a point where we have a job to do basically. And the funding is critical to have us do that job.
Thank you, Kai. Well, as the year comes to a close, I really want to encourage folks to support us, support the work that we're doing. If you can't be on the front lines and organizing yourself, that's a way that you can get involved and tangibly, materially support these efforts. So thank you for joining once again, Kai. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
And we'll
No,
talk
thanks,
to you
Matt.
soon.
Thanks for all you do as well.
I want to thank you for listening to our show and let you know a few ways you can support Truth and Reckoning. First, share this broadcast with your friends and family. Leave a positive review via your podcast app. Visit the Truth and Reckoning YouTube channel and leave a thumbs up and a comment. The full scope of the work of CELDF, including this show, comes with a financial cost. So if you're able to make a donation, go to CELDF.org. That's CELDF.org. But most importantly, our goal for this show is to empower you to take action. So the best way you can show your support is to get involved with your community and protecting the place where you live. Thank you very much.